Hello, everybody. Once again, we are going live, doing another episode of the Truehope cast. This is episode 131, where we're going to be talking about Health Canada and the dark history that they have. Coming from our background with Truehope, I've been with Truehope for over 20 years now. We have a significant, rich history with Health Canada in relation to suppression of evidence, in relation to the suppression of science, shutting down double-blind placebo-controlled trials that would have validated the effect that vitamin and mineral supplementation will have on people's mental health. And then also talking about regulatory barriers, major protests across Canada, all that type of stuff. Well, today, just like we had a couple of weeks ago, we had a guest on, Sean Buckley, who's a lawyer who has worked significantly with Truehope in the past. And we had him on again to talk about the implications that Health Canada's new regulations are going to have on your access to natural health products, life-saving products. And so today, we are once again bringing on a great guest. Throughout all my journeys with Truehope, for quite a period of time there, I spent a lot of time traveling across mainly Western Canada, presenting at different health shows. And as part of that, I got to meet a lot of great people. And one of those people was actually a holistic nutritionist by the name of Lisa Kilgour. And she would present as well at these different health shows. And so we found ourselves crossing paths quite a few times. And my presenting at the shows kind of came to an end. My last show was in 2019, the spring of 2019, before COVID even hit and shut down the shows. And that was due to the media running a major campaign against me that prevented the shows from even wanting to have me on board. It's way too controversial to have me. And they basically shut me down. And then we would see later on how they'd take the same tactics that they employed against me and use them against people like Del Bigtree to prevent him from being able to present at different shows. And so that was when I stopped presenting. And here we are today. Our paths cross again. And so I want to introduce you to Lisa Kilgour, and I'm bringing her on now.
Thanks so much, David. It's so nice to be working together again. It's been a long time.
It really has. It really has. Before I was, kicked out of the shows, before the shows actually came to an official close from COVID, you had already left the scenes as well at that point in time, kind of taken on, a different path with your journey. I just want to, you to introduce yourself to the audience and kind of, give a history of where you're coming from in the natural health industry, what it is that you do, what it is that you've done, and, bring us up to today. But, you'd mentioned before that you got involved in all this back in 2002.
Yeah, so I'm a registered holistic nutritionist, and I got my designation in 2007, but I came into the industry in the summer of 2002, right at the height of a Kava recall, which that was my job in the company. But I was also there for the introduction of the 2004 NHP guidelines. I went back to school, became a holistic nutritionist, became an educator I've now worked with 4 different supplement companies in Canada. The current one is a distributor of 4 companies and then has their own line. So I've watched it all happen. But most of my day is spent working one-on-one with people in both Canada and the US, and actually worldwide, but most of my clients are in Canada and the US. And there's a really great respect in the US of Canadian supplements right now due to the 2004 regulations. But I'm watching these new really innovative products come up in the States that my US clients have access to, but we don't have them here in Canada. And these changes are going to make that even harder, because there was already such a leap to get into Canada. We lost a lot of great companies in 2004, and we're going to lose a lot more. And so I'm a holistic nutritionist working with people and using supplements as a means to help preventative medicine and help them kind of gain their health back. And they're important in my life.
All right. Now, you say they're important in your life. Now, many people would say, yeah, but you have a bias because you make money off of them. But how do you see them being important in the lives of everybody else? Like in relation to that, because they're important in my life as well. I mean, I've got, the lineup that we work with in Canada. We have more in the US than we have in Canada. We are an international company that actually sells into over 100 different countries, obviously in smaller amounts because of regulatory issues. Like example, in Germany, we get people phoning us from Germany wanting our products. Well, go to the doctor, get a prescription so that you can get it across the border. Really, like that's how crazy the regulations are there, preventing people from having access. Now, fortunately, in Canada, we haven't yet experienced those types of issues to that great of an effect like they are seeing in Europe already or Australia. But these products are important to me. But what are you seeing? You're working one-on-one with people. How do you see that as impactful for them when we're talking about government regulations that are supposed to be, it's coming under the guise of protecting our health, and we know that it's clearly not, and we're going to get into the history that identifies that that's not what Health Canada is about whatsoever. But yeah, please tell me, what are you seeing with your own clientele, and how do you think it's going to negatively impact the general public?
Well, first, I don't sell supplements at all. I do not make a dime off the sale of supplements. Other than I have a small Amazon store simply so I can point video people to here are some brands I like. I think I make $2 a month off it. Instead, as an educator, I'm simply educating retail staff on products. So I don't make commission off anything. Most of my day is spent helping people one-on-one. And if the price of supplements skyrockets and or basics that are really, really helpful, like lion's mane mushroom or the adaptogenic herbs, things above and beyond like vitamin C and vitamin D, which we also need, and I'm also concerned that those prices are going to go up, then the ability to help our bodies in this incredibly stressful world where we just simply are creating more deficiencies than food can create because we're living in fight or flight all the time. Our food is lacking nutrients. And so most people who come to see me need at least a few supplements to help bring their body back to that balance of homeostasis. I'm a food person. I'm a holistic nutritionist. I do food as much as possible. I keep supplements down to a bare minimum. And it's very, very rare that you can live in this world, especially in Canada, without at least a few supplements like vitamin D, bare minimum. And so, yeah, I'm very worried about just being able to help people move out of burnout, help people with their digestive issues, and not have these products available at a price point that is doable for the average Canadian.
Perfect. You get me thinking about when I used to do a lot of public presentations. I would always lead in. The first 10 minutes of my presentation would actually be about or discussing why we're in the state that we're in, talking about, the fact that over the last 150 years, our food has gotten to the point that in many instances, there's less than 80% of, say copper or calcium or, all of these different nutrients. How, it's just not there in the food anymore because of what's taking place within farming. And I'm surrounded by big factory farms here, and I know what they do. And I'm telling you, they're not supplementing with all of the different trace minerals and all that back into the soil. They're using the P5, the potassium, phosphorus, nitrogen supplementation for the most part, which produces really good looking plants fast, but they are not nutrient dense. And so what we've seen from that, and there's studies to show this, that we have an over 50% reduction in the mineral content found within the soils compared to what we would have 100 years ago. And then when you actually analyze the food that's being produced in mass, that, like I said before, many of those foods are coming out with an over 80% deficiency in many of the key nutrients that we need to thrive on a daily basis. And so I basically lay out the foundation, substantiating that it's an unfortunate nature that we're in today that we actually require supplementation because our food is not supplying all of the nutrients that we need. Even when we choose a fairly healthy diet, we're still going to be lacking. And so as part of what I do, actually, I'm on this small farm here we're growing our own food. We are supplementing that soil. I took 4,000 pounds of composted mineral that was brought in from different parts of the world, so it's rich in all sorts of different minerals that you may not just find readily available in the soil here. And it was composted. It's now in organic form. I put it in, and I apply compost tea as an activator, the bacteria and all that. And now I have life in the soil that is now rich in minerals. So now the food that I grow should actually, like Hippocrates said 2,400 years ago, be my medicine, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it has what it needs to be my medicine, to heal my body. So we're doing that, and I'm educating on that. But the unfortunate nature is, for the time being, until we get all that set up, I still consume the supplements that we supply.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason being is I need them to feel great on a daily basis. I come from a history of mental illness, of suicides in my own family. And so to prevent those types of issues from plaguing myself and my children, we consume those. My wife as well. We all thrive on them. But we'll get to the point at some, in the future where we don't need those pills anymore because our food has those things. And so, like you're saying there, it's a hard thing to get by without any supplementation, especially vitamin D in the northern countries.
Yeah.
People struggle significantly, and vitamin D is so important for so many areas of the body in relation to, hormone production, in relation to neurotransmitter production, which is what we focus in on, especially, production of things like dopamine and serotonin. If you're lacking vitamin D, you will not be producing the dopamine or the serotonin, because there's 7 crucial nutrients that lead up to the production of those. And vitamin D is one of those in each one of those pathways for facilitating the production of serotonin and dopamine. And if you don't have adequate levels of that, you are going to be miserable. You're not going to feel great about life. And ultimately, you're likely going to find yourself self-medicating with other things that are going to give you a dopamine fix, or try to cover up, the low-lying feeling of just depression and whatnot from not having enough serotonin.
Yeah.
So we deal with that on a regular basis. And so this is where your concern is coming from, is that with the rise of costs in relation to what Health Canada is proposing. Now, just for the audience here, Health Canada is proposing something that you've probably seen. If you're here in Canada, you are seeing, if you go to the health food store, this SOS campaign.
Mm-hmm.
It's all over the place, and it's really focusing in on the cost recovery that Health Canada is trying to institute, saying, hey, it's cost us a lot of money to set up these regulations going back to 2004, where we're licensing natural health products and all this stuff. They didn't have to do that, by the way, but they decided to do that. They decided to regulate. Now they're saying, hey, the regulations are costing money, right? It's costing the government. So now we want to get that cost back from the industry. So we're going to increase your licensing fees. We're going to increase your site licensing fees and make it a yearly basis that you have to do this. And they're talking about all these different ways that they can extract money from the natural health community, which isn't just coming out of the pockets of the companies. The companies have to, because the profit margins are low, transfer that on to the end user. So they're not taxing the natural health community. They're taxing the consumers of natural health products, is what they're doing, because a company like ours has to transfer that cost, because we've already made our profit margins as low as we can go.
And that's what I find really interesting about the media coverage of this, because if you don't understand the industry very well, it makes rational sense. A company should pay for the cost recovery of the government. The taxpayer shouldn't pay for this. But here's the thing. And the argument, of course, being pharmaceutical companies do this all the time. But pharmaceutical companies get government grants on a regular basis for the innovation of their product. They are getting money from a lot of nonprofits that are raising money for them to help with the cost of creating those innovative products. And this is my cat Aya, who likes to be a part of everything. And supplement companies are different. They're not getting government or nonprofit grants for the creation of these new products. Instead, they are fitting the bill themselves. But then there's a huge difference in that profit margin. Pharmaceutical company on average in Canada, according to, I looked it up, Natural Institute of Health, is about 76% profit margin. That's not including any grants that they were given for that product development. Supplement companies, you can speak more to that, but first the supplement company has their profit margin, and then they sell it to a supplement to a health food store, who then has their profit margin, and that end profit has to be still a price that the average Canadian can afford. And we're kind of maxed out there with inflation happening right now. Nobody can afford costs going up anymore. And supplement companies are doing that anyways because of just the cost of the raw materials. And so we have to keep in mind what this industry is and how different it actually is to the pharmaceutical companies, and why the cost recovery is actually going to create major problems for the consumer if that supplement company can even stay in business in the first place. These are companies that are making millions, not billions. Like they're usually about 10 to 30 billion is the average supplement company. And the top six, oops, sorry, now she's hitting my microphone. The top six pharma companies in Canada make over $1 billion. So there is a huge difference in the amount of profit, amount of money going through these companies. And so to ask them to each do the same thing in this cost recovery isn't the same thing. And we are like, our vitamin D is going to go up, but then also the supplements to help with blood sugar control and brain health and on just our basic vitamins and minerals that we need to get through this stressful life. It's not just the soil is lacking the minerals, it's that we actually burn through more vitamins and minerals every day because we're in fight or flight, and that staying in fight or flight, the body is just trying to keep you alive today, and so isn't saving for the future. And that's another big cause of us becoming deficient. And so even if our soil was perfect, and it's far from it, as you very well put, we are living this incredibly stressful life, and that alone gives us this need for extra nutrients.
Absolutely. I love that. I'm gonna build on that point. I mean, this is kind of a digression from the Health Canada issue, but it will circle back to really illustrate, the timing is horrific with what Health Canada is doing, not just economically, but also in relation to what's been going on over the past 3 years and the incredible rise in anxiety and stress because of the uncertainty of life. But when you were talking about, this fight or flight, when you're talking about the stresses that are taking place, and that actually makes us burn through more nutrition, I want to validate that point. You see, we work with people, when in Canada, we have a different model. We put it in through the health food stores. They supply it to those that want it, and many times for mental health concerns, or stress or anxiety, kids with ADD, ADHD, that type of thing, right? And that's what many parents or people are just coming in for, to get it for, is those particular ailments. But we have a different model that we've been applying since the late 90s. And what it is working direct with consumer. And so we'll say, have somebody phone us in or phone us up, our call center. And they'll say, hey, I've got major depression. Okay. Are you on medications? Yes. And they give the list of medications. We set up a file for them. They get put into our database. And it's a very comprehensive database that has many different data points that are being tracked. And including symptoms, sleep, consumption of caffeine, alcohol, all these types of factors are being put in there so that we can identify what's going on with the symptom reduction, or if there's a lack of symptom reduction, because we're anticipating that there's going to be a major symptom reduction in relation to major depression or anxiety or psychosis or whatever it is, bipolar. And so what's of interest is when we get somebody well, and they've now obtained a baseline, and they're just functioning, and they're not, all over the place, bad days, good days, bad days, good days, and they're doing well. They're stable. If a stressful situation arises, suddenly, over the next week or two, things start to go south again. Their symptoms begin to return. And it's not because they changed their diet. It's not because they stopped taking the supplements either. We still have two major factors here that are playing into this, that hey, I was stable before, but now I'm not. What's going on? And what it is that the stress will actually, like you said there, make you consume more nutrition. So now the nutrition that you were getting that was working before isn't enough. And so what we've identified over the years, and it's common practice now, somebody goes through a stressful situation, maybe there's a passing in the family, you take more of the supplements, you take more of the Empower Plus, you need more of those vitamins and minerals to get you through that situation, because your body is now rapidly consuming that. And so now let's talk about the horrific timing of Health Canada. Health Canada is now introducing all of this, and they've been trying to do so for quite a while now. Back in 1997, there was a major push, and that was before my day. It wasn't before my father's days, but it was before my days. I was still 1997. I think I was just entering high school at that time, and so here they're introducing this, these proposed regulations that are going to make the vitamins and minerals and all of your supplements, put them into a drug style model, which is just going to bankrupt the industry. And they proved that it already worked, in Australia, previous to that, where now, the shelves were barren. And this was back in the 2000s. I don't know if things have changed now. I don't know the state of Australia and their natural health community there now, but back then it was really bad, barren shelves, all that type of stuff going on. And so they tried to do the same thing in Canada, and the people spoke out and said, no, we're not interested, right? And I believe it was the biggest movement. I think they had a petition of over 1 million people back in 1997. And remember, that's before social media days, right? This is like grassroots dissemination of information, and people were not happy whatsoever. And so they backed off. Well, they tried it again. So then they snuck it in 2004 with this kind of passive, like, we're going to do this soft regulations, but it's not going to mean a whole lot. Just, we're just going to make sure that the products are scientifically backed and that they're safe for consumers. So in 2004 they come up with the regulations, but they're not enforcing them. So nobody is really raising the alarm bells. Well, not nobody. I mean, we were part of a smaller movement, but the industry as a whole wasn't getting the picture. They weren't getting the message, and they were not standing up and saying, no, we don't want these regulations at all. We know that this is a Trojan horse. You're slipping it in, and it's only a matter of time before this thing opens up and we've got a whole other beast on our hands. So 2004, they introduced it. But in 2000, and I want to say it's 8, Bill C-51, they go to introduce Bill C-51, which is, we're going to talk about this, is exactly what they just pushed through with Bill C-47. It's going to change the way that the government deals with natural health products. It's going to put it more into a drug model, and it also gives Health Canada extraordinary enforcement powers to come in and basically bankrupt companies with $5 million fines. I can tell you this much: in Canada, with what we're working with through the health food stores and naturopaths and holistic practitioners and all that, is that a $5 million fine is unbearable.
Unbearable. No, but I don't know of a single company that could weather the storm of one $5 million fine.
Right. Like, the profit margins just aren't there. Like you had mentioned, I think you said 10 to 30 billion for a health company. I think you...
No, 10 to 30 million for a health company. Sorry if I said billion. And then the pharmaceutical companies are all well over $1 billion. Like, that's a huge difference in what a $5 million fine is.
Exactly. So you can't apply the same type of enforcement to the natural health community as you can to the pharmaceutical industry, right? Which is really being monopolized and protected by the government in the first place, that they can be so profitable, right, in what they're doing. Like, it's really due to government regulation. It's kept the small guys out, and it's allowed the big guys to get big and protect, they're protected through patents and all that type of stuff with this synthetic garbage medication. I'll just say it straight up for what, it's a generalization, but it applies almost all the time. Just synthetic garbage medication that causes more issues down the road than the issues that it's supposed to actually help with. And they're being protected in this, and then it's being pushed through the medical system to the exclusion of products like ours, which we've attempted to work with the government and get it through the formulary so that it could actually become prescribed, because not only was it scientifically being shown to be more effective than your antidepressants and all that, but it didn't come with the side effects, and it was returning people back to living normal lives, that they could be contributing members of society rather than being on disability for the rest of their life, and also having their medications covered and all this, just being a burden to society. And nobody wants to be a burden to society. So we were actually working with the government on this, and we would make some headway, and we'd just get to a certain point and stonewall, not interested, even though the science was there to show that it was a good route to go. In fact, when I was introducing this earlier on, I was talking about suppression of evidence and of science from Health Canada. The double-blind placebo-controlled trial that was going to happen in the early 2000s was actually being funded by the Alberta government. The Alberta government was funding over $500,000 into a double-blind placebo-controlled trial on the Empower Plus after the first study came out showing it was over 3 times more effective than your standard antidepressants. Health Canada, as soon as they caught word of it, they swooped in and they shut down that study. And then, one thing would lead to another. And eventually we'd have a gun-drawn raid on our headquarters in Raymond, Alberta. A whole debacle taking place for a number of years. And so, this is what Health Canada is all about. But here, we're going through this timeline. We're up to 2008. They're trying to put through this legislation that's going to decimate the industry. And once again, we have protests in every major city across Canada. The people speak. They say, no, we don't want this, right? This is not what we're interested in. What do? They back off. They back off again. They tried to sneak it again the next time that Parliament came in, and I believe that was Bill C5 and C6 that they tried to slip it in, and it didn't work. So now here we are, 15 years later, and all of a sudden they slip it in under the radar as part of the budget bill. And who's going to oppose the budget bill?
Exactly. Right? And no conversation. Industry didn't get any chance. I have a story regarding how the Health Canada protects pharmaceutical companies over supplements. So I started in this industry in 2002. Working in customer service for a supplement company. And my job was to deal with a Kava return. So at that time, ironically, about 3 months after the Kava is this amazing nervine that is that's wonderful for sleep. And Health Canada decided, because of one study on 7 people in Germany who took a large amount of the wrong part of the plant and had liver damage. This I've seen in articles brought up. It's still today about Kava can be dangerous and can be toxic. It's based, I'm sure, on this study. And so Health Canada said, this is dangerous, it must go. So I worked for a company who had Kava in one of their products. And so I was calling every supplement company saying, you have to send me back your product because we're not allowed to sell it anymore. It wasn't that there was just like, you can't sell it anymore. It was a full-on recall, which Health Canada claims they can't do. Well, I've been through a recall from Health Canada before in 2002. A few months later, a very popular sleep drug came out. And it was a big guy. It was one of those that had tons of media. I went to a drug show where they had a corner of the entire show because it was such a big deal. And then 7 years later, around the time that drug went generic, Kava is back on the market. We can also see the same thing happen with red yeast rice and the statin drugs. Exactly the same process. It was pulled off the market for being dangerous. Statin drugs come out, and then 7 years later, it's back on the market with the it can be dangerous thing. Well, Kava has got thousands of years of traditional use, and I'm grateful it's back on the market because it is such a wonderful nervine for this. Like with this time of life, we desperately need Kava. But that's when I got my first taste of, oh, we have to be careful in the supplement world. The pharma companies can come and tamp us out, and that company I was working for a few years later brought out a great bone building product that had good research behind it, and it was really, really effective. And I was working in marketing, and we were constantly watching our messaging because we couldn't the idea was we can't let pharma know this exists because they'll come and stamp us out. And that wasn't like the thing you don't say. We were literally saying that in meetings. Like, how do we promote that this has a good research behind it and is really effective without anybody, like even just a smear campaign coming through, which they were doing once a year, at least some big press release about antioxidants are dangerous or beta carotene is dangerous. Like that was that time. And so I don't think consumers know this because supplement companies don't talk about this politics behind it, but because I've like danced in so many different companies, I'm happy as a practitioner to say, like, we got to watch our back. And Health Canada has always been protecting pharma over supplements when supplements are where the safety actually is. And that these are helping, these have traditional use, that we've been using them for thousands of years. Our bodies understand what they are. And it frustrates me at even the simple idea that we might not have as much access to them, or that they won't be affordable.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's twisted really when you sum it up as to what Health Canada is all about and whose health they're protecting. The way that I categorize it is this simple. Health Canada is just simply protecting the health or the bottom line profits of the pharmaceutical industry. That's what it is. Because when we take a look at what they've done, I've shared this in the past 2 podcasts as well with Sean Buckley. Sean Buckley had in-depth knowledge about it, having cross-examined many of the witnesses that testified to this effect within our own court cases. But Health Canada actually caused deaths. They actually killed people in Canada through the seizure of our products. They caused suicides, and they were warned about it beforehand. They were well aware of it, and they did nothing about it to remedy the situation other than setting up a 1-800 crisis line that had a simple script that when somebody would phone in that was extremely desperate, saying, hey, look, like, I've got my life back. I was suicidal. I was institutionalized. I was in the psych wards, all that type of stuff. But now I've got my life back and I don't have access to this. What are you doing? They'd be sent over to a 1-800 crisis line where there was a script that would basically say, you need to go back to your doctor. You need to get back on your medications. You'll no longer have access to this dangerous drug. They were trying to classify our vitamins and minerals as a drug, right? And then here we are, same formula, and it has an NPN license, a natural product number on it, and yet they're calling it a drug. They're trying to mischaracterize it, saying it's a dangerous drug. And these are vitamins and minerals. 33 out of the 36 ingredients in there are found in our daily diet every single day. Yeah. And then if you eat grapes with seeds in them, there's one more. And then if you have citrus, there's another one. So now you get 35 out of the 36 ingredients in your daily diet. And then ginkgo biloba, well, nobody's really going out and just consuming ginkgo biloba. But, these are all safe things that we are finding on a daily basis. And yet they're calling us a drug and calling it dangerous when they had no substance to back it up. Well, what does this result in? It actually resulted in suicides that they were warned about. They were warned about it actually by Ron Lejeunesse, who was the head of the Alberta chapter of the Canadian Mental Health Association. He's got no ties to us whatsoever, but he knows people that have gotten well using our supplements, and Health Canada is putting them in harm's way. He's warning Health Canada about it. Health Canada is doing nothing about it. Other than setting up this 1-800 crisis line to say, go back to the doctors, go back to the psych wards, go back to the dismal life that you had before, right? And so suicides resulted. Ron Lejeunesse knew personally of 2 of them, and he testifies to that effect on stand, a couple of years later when we find ourselves in court, when Health Canada is still trying to shut us down. And it's absolutely disgusting when you look at it. See, it'd be one thing if Health Canada was ignorant to the issue, if they had no idea that what they were doing was actually putting people in harm's way. But they knew about it. They were forewarned about it, and yet they continued to move forward with this reckless activity that was going to ultimately kill people. They killed people, and now what that constitutes is an element of criminality, like a significant element of criminality. It'd be similar to criminal negligence, except that they were proactively working towards something. So they actually created the situation, whereas criminal negligence is you neglected to do something and it resulted, well, if it resulted in death, that's up to 25 years in jail here in Canada. Yet here they're proactively moving forward with something. So their level of criminality is on par with criminal negligence resulting in death. And yet nobody's held to account when it comes out in court. When the evidence comes right out, nobody is ever held to account. Nobody loses their jobs, nothing. Health Canada just continues to move on and try to find sneakier ways to, basically snuff out companies like ourselves and other therapeutic companies out there that have a product that will actually go toe-to-toe without the negative effects of the pharmaceutical industry, but they'll go toe-to-toe and actually knock out the bottom line. So they're really doing what they can to protect the pharmaceutical industry, and that's the really disturbing part about all of this, because
Mhm.
we all know that there's an inherent risk. Every time that you consume a pharmaceutical, there's an inherent risk of some significant side effect. I'm not going to call it a side effect. It's just an effect, is what it is. It's maybe not the marketed effect that they're trying to promote it for, but it is an effect that some people will get from it, just like some people will get the marketed effect. Not all people. Like, somebody will take an antidepressant and it doesn't help with the
Mhm.
depression whatsoever,
Mhm.
right? But they may
Mhm.
get the other effects from that. And so it's absolutely disturbing that they're protecting a dangerous industry that comes with inherent risk, um, while trying to snuff out what we've been using, like you said, for thousands of years. The things that should be found in our food on a daily basis, they're trying to prevent that from being able to be made available in an effective form. And it's absolutely disgusting, because it has nothing to do with the health of Canadians. In fact, it's quite the opposite.
Mhm. Exactly, and while of course your product is not a multivitamin, but like when you look at it just like as a category, because it's mostly vitamins and minerals, how can they call your product a drug when a multivitamin isn't considered a drug? Like, it's, I don't understand how they could have gotten away with that, other than people don't know what was in your product and therefore could read that and say, oh, somebody's trying to pass off a drug as a natural supplement. It's like, no, they're trying to pass off vitamins and minerals that are formulated very specifically. It's not a drug.
No, absolutely
Mhm.
not.
Mhm.
Yeah, and just shocking. And you know what? There would have never been an issue if the first study was never published and it ended up on CTV national news and went across Canada, because it was literally the very next day after that news clip aired, talking about this profound small study out of the University of Calgary, and Health Canada comes in the very next day, and they just came in with a bulldozer and were just trying to shut everything down, stop the science, stop the manufacturing, stop the distribution of the product in Canada, stop all of it.
Mhm.
And it would have never been an issue,
Yeah.
because, yeah, the label just reads as a multivitamin. In essence, it is a multivitamin or a micronutrient, but
Mhm.
it is specifically formulated, and
Mhm.
we put the minerals through a phenomenal process that allows for the body to readily uptake those minerals. That's really
Mhm.
what sets it apart, is just the fact that the minerals are in proper balance and they are extremely bioavailable, so that you can actually get the effects from those minerals. Other than
Mhm.
that, really, it's just a very comprehensive, broad spectrum multivitamin is what it
Yeah.
is, and can be
And
taken as such.
most people don't understand the bioavailability is actually really important too. Years ago, a very close friend of mine worked in a provincial health minister's office, and he was kind of the spin doctor in the, like, he was writing press releases for the health minister. And he came across, he wasn't in the health industry at all, he came across some amazing research on the health benefits of vitamin D. So he goes to the health minister and he's like, we need to talk about this, like, this is a big deal, this is going to help people. Health minister looks at him, pauses, and just says, that's not the industry we're in, that's not our job. And that was it. And he's like, oh, okay. He didn't last very long in that job. He did, like, once he realized, oh, we're not here to help Canadians be better. He just watched lobbyists go in and out. And so, yeah, he wasn't there long, but it was like a big deal of like this eye-opening moment of, you won't even talk about the research on vitamin D.
Mhm.
Okay.
That's telling. Let's dive into that just for a moment.
Mhm.
So now we're talking outside of, Health Canada. We're just talking about general government here, and we're talking about the marriage of government and the pharmaceutical industry is really what we're doing here.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
it brings back to mind something that all of a sudden emerged in our own personal court case. And when I say personal, my wife and my court case that we had over the death of our son, which, without getting into too much detail, in essence, he ends up in an emergency situation due to an electrolyte imbalance. And he gets into an ambulance, doesn't have the proper equipment in the ambulance to intubate him. So he goes 8.5 minutes without any oxygen. They get him into the hospital. They discover during transport to a larger facility that he actually had elevated potassium. And we're not sure exactly why. He had drinking we went and bought a potassium or an electrolyte supplement, and he had consumed it, and actually a few hours before he ended up in crisis. We don't know if there was a potassium hotspot. We don't know if there was something that allowed for the potassium to raise in the body. We don't know. We actually will probably never find out, because they tried to hide the evidence, but they discovered it. They gave him calcium chloride, which helps balance out the potassium issues. And even though he'd gone through this situation, he reanimates and begins to, breathe on his own, and his heart starts to beat on its own. They're reducing him off medication like crazy, the epinephrine that they had him on, and all that. And it looks hopeful, but then they used a paralytic medication on him that was contraindicated for electrolyte imbalances, and all of a sudden they put him into cardiac arrest, and it's basically game over at that point. So here we get into a court case after they fabricate this whole narrative about he had bacterial meningitis, right? Mm-hmm. And so it absolves them of all responsibility. In fact, they actually said it. They said it didn't matter that the ambulance didn't have the equipment. He was already dead from bacterial meningitis. Well, that's funny, because here 2 hours later, he's alive again, and then you killed him with a paralytic medication that you shouldn't have used. It doesn't make sense. So here we have this situation arising. We end up in the courts where they're hiding a lot of evidence, hundreds of pages of medical evidence, the first court round. We end up going through 2 trials, 2 appeals, Supreme Court, all that. But what happens is they obtain, in the first trial, a wrongful conviction against my wife and I. And as soon as they obtained that, this narrative started to rise up in the courtroom, and it was really interesting. The first time I heard it, I was shocked. I'm trying to analyze, what does that mean? As soon as they'd gotten this conviction and now we're going for sentencing, the Crown prosecution starts to use this phrase. This is the only criminal code approved standard of care. And what they were referencing is the fact that we didn't immediately, electrolyte imbalance pops up, whatever, he wasn't ill to the point that, a normal parent would be like, let's take him in. It looked like he was starting to get the flu, is what it looked like. He wasn't vomiting, and he wasn't exhibiting signs of pain, nothing like that. So we're working with it at home, right? Like, you take him to the doctor, you're going to get turned away from the doctor. And so because we didn't go to the doctor and seek out whatever whatever things that they have to provide for any ailment, whatever pharmaceuticals, now we have gone against the criminal code approved standard of care, which I can't find in the criminal code anywhere. I can't find anything that attaches it to the pharmaceutical industry. But it was really interesting because they began to use that phrase a number of times, this in driving it in. You fast forward, because then we went for appeal. We got done dirty on the appeal, but then we went to Supreme Court. 7 of the judges unanimously, it was all 7 judges, the whole panel, unanimously decided, hey, this was wrong. This conviction's wrong. Send it back to court again. So now here we fast forward to 2019, and we've got a judge stating this in front of the media, but the media won't report this. The media just keeps on parroting this false narrative, misleading the Canadians as they're cheering about these parents getting crucified. Meanwhile, it's actually their rights that are being taken away. Here we have this judge who states it's not negligence that brings the Stephans to court today, but rather this is a case about choice of care. Naturopathy versus allopathy. Choice of care. The judge, and this is the second top judge in all of Alberta who assigned himself to the case at this point in time. Here he's helping to correct the narrative and send a message. This is about choice of care. This is now attached to criminality, right? Mm-hmm. Pharmaceutical versus natural medicine, all that type of stuff. And that's shocking. That's shocking that somehow that the pharmaceutical industry has become so infiltrated into the government with the whole revolving door. We see it all the time. I mean, in the US, it's more evident, right? You have this CEO resign from, GlaxoSmithKline. What do? They go straight over to FDA. All of a sudden, they're in the FDA. You see this revolving door where it's just this marriage. It's as if they're one entity altogether, the pharmaceutical industry and the government. And now we actually see that becoming evident in law. We see it, like you brought up that example, evident within just policy making and even just educating from a government perspective, educating the public, and they refuse to educate on the effects of these natural things that we need on a daily basis that we have in our bodies already, but in small amounts rather than in the therapeutic amounts that are necessary. It's just it's twisted. It's really quite shocking. And so, you know, I appreciate you sharing that element there, because a lot of people don't know what's going on behind closed doors. They don't understand the marriage of government and the pharmaceutical industry. They don't understand the dark history of the pharmaceutical industry and the constant cover up and the suppression of science there that would illustrate that their products are actually far more dangerous than the public are led to believe. And then, you know, you end up with people dying. In fact, you know, I shared this on the last podcast. My mother suffered with bipolar for 10 years. She went and got on Prozac, and 3 weeks later she killed herself. Right? Like, and that's in 94. You know, and now in the early 2000s, this evidence comes out, this scientific evidence that was there all along, showing that Prozac can increase the risk of suicide by 8 to 12 times in certain circumstances. But at minimum, it increases the risk of suicide by 2 times. You're twice as likely to die from suicide by taking Prozac than not taking Prozac.
And Prozac probably wasn't tested on women anyway, so they didn't actually know what your mother's reaction would have been because of the giant medical bias that we're only starting to understand, that especially in the 90s, there was almost no drugs tested on women. And therefore it was in practice that they realized, oh, the dosage is different for women versus men. I think what consumers need to really understand is the lack of power that supplement companies have, that they aren't these profit mongers either, that they are often just barely getting by with paying their employees and keeping those products on the shelves. And they're doing everything they can to keep the price of each product as low as possible because what won't sell otherwise. But now this is going to hinder all of them from working properly, and we're not getting the information that we should be getting. There's a study in 2010 that was done here in Canada that found that if all Canadians had proper levels of vitamin D, they would have, we would save, I believe it was over $13 billion. It was well over $1 billion in our healthcare. But it would only cost us like 30 million to actually like do all the testing and do all the supplementation, but also save 40,000 lives each year with just proper vitamin D supplementation. This is now 13 years later. Has that ever come into pass? Like, this was a Canadian study even. Ironically, right at the same time, the Harper government pulled vitamin D testing out of what they will pay for. And so now if you can get vitamin D testing, which takes a bit of a hoop to jump through, you would then have to pay $60 or $70 for it. But knowing your vitamin D level can reduce your risk of autoimmune conditions, of cancer and cancer recurrence, and just help like your neurotransmitters, as you mentioned before. And vitamin D is one of the cheapest supplements currently right now. We all in Canada need it. That's what that study said. And that is in jeopardy. How are we going to be able to buy a 6 months of vitamin D for $20 so that therefore it's still in the price point of almost every Canadian? Well, if that changes, our health is going to drop dramatically. And that's not even speaking to all of the other great things that we have on the market.
Okay, you brought up something about the Harper government. So conservative government pulls the testing, right? It's removed. So I want to touch on a topic there because I know a lot of people are like, hey, yeah, you know, we're under the liberal government right now, Trudeau, whatever. If only we could get that conservative government. Now, you've been in the industry for a long time. I'm just going to ask a simple question. Have you seen any difference in relation to natural health freedom and greater access to natural health products with any of the governments being in play?
No. What I see is one government comes in and does the mean thing. The other governments, the other party will say, hey, if you bring us in, we'll do some great stuff. They come in and they never reverse what had just happened. And so, yeah, maybe it was the conservative government that pulled this back, but especially through the last 3 years, have we brought back vitamin D testing? No. And when I have to educate my clients on how to ask for vitamin D testing, even just to get it on the requisition, and then they have to pay for it. Often they bring their requisition in, and they're willing to pay for it, and it's pulled off the where they go to get the testing done, the blood drawn, they pull the vitamin D off. And it's what we do know is that knowing your blood saturation of vitamin D will determine your dose, and that every single person requires a different amount of vitamin D. It's not just this 2,000 IUs of vitamin D a day is enough for everybody. We need to do this testing to figure out what our body's requirements are because of absorbability, and also just like what your body needs. And that was pulled and not brought back by all of these years of having a liberal and currently liberal NDP combo. They haven't brought back vitamin D testing. It hasn't even been spoken about, even though it would be incredibly helpful for our overall health, and according to that study, dramatically reduce our healthcare spending.
Yeah. For the first 10 years, well, I guess it's not quite the first 10 years, a few years into doing what we're doing here with the Truehope supplements, we realized that there were some major issues with government regulation. So we began to involve ourselves in politics significantly, where we could actually change over our call center to become a promotional center, if you will, making call outs for different candidates and whatnot. And we actually helped with the promotion of different candidates' campaigns in the local areas and all that, to, in essence, I guess you'd say it would be influencing the outcome of the election by helping, saying this candidate stands for freedom here, this candidate, right? Mm-hmm. And so, we actually used to really assist with politics, if you will, in hoping that we could actually begin to change things. Well, we pulled out of that. Mm-hmm. By probably around 2009, 2010, we just stopped because we realized it doesn't matter which government, which party is in power. It doesn't make a difference. It's like you say, basically, you have the good cop, bad cop, but it's like they're almost playing for almost. I mean, it's a different flavor, but a different message, but ultimately it's the same puppet master pulling the strings at the top, right?
Yeah, 100%.
And so, for any of the audience that are watching and saying, well, if we could only just get the liberal government out and all that, hey, don't get me wrong. Hey, that maybe that could be a good thing. Maybe not, but maybe it'd be a good thing. Mm-hmm. It's not going to bring about the change that you're looking for.
Yeah. Even though currently the Conservative Party is saying, bring us in, we'll get rid of this. I have yet to see those kind of campaign promises fulfilled. There's usually some kind of stopping. And so, I'll see it when I believe it.
Exactly. The only major thing I think that I've ever seen turned around is the gun control or the registration, which is great, because the amount that was costing the taxpayers to have guns registered for what? Like, it wasn't preventing crime. There was nothing to show statistically that was actually beneficial to the Canadians, but it was sure costing a lot of money. That was the only thing that I've ever seen reversed, and that was 2012 when the Conservatives reversed that. But so one out of how many major things have been put into place, and everybody's crying about it, and all they do is they pacify us over time, and eventually it just becomes the norm. Yeah. So
we need to not forget this. I think the reason the long gun registry got canceled is because we as the people said, we're not going to stop talking about this until you do it. And what we have very short attention spans nowadays. And if something isn't being talked about, it stops being in our wheelhouse because there is so much going on. It makes sense. Like Bill C-47 was talked about a lot in July. I talked about it a lot in July, and then people forgot about it. But we won't forget about it once the costs of our products go up, or products are just gone. We do have power as people. We just have to keep pushing and talking and pushing and talking, and make it so whoever wins in the next election knows that your vote depends on us being able to stay healthy, us being able to still take care of ourselves in the way that we want to, and having that choice to be able to eat good food and heal our bodies, or help our bodies function properly. We need to yell and scream. And maybe if we yell and scream, things will
Yeah.
change, but I still don't know if they will. But it's still worth it. It's still like,
Oh, it's
it's
still
the
worth
only thing we can
absolutely.
do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even if you think the battle's lost, you fight it anyways.
Hmm.
Even
Yeah.
just for the sake of having good conscience, knowing that you did all that you could do.
Yeah.
And
And it
with
worked
the
in
MPs,
2008. And it worked in
yeah,
2008.
exactly. It worked in 2008. The people spoke. So now they've just waited, snake in the grass type stuff, and they snuck it in
Hmm.
as soon as nobody was looking, as soon as we were distracted with other things, they snuck it into the budget bill. Now Health Canada has extraordinary enforcement powers. Have they begun to employ them yet? No, not that we're aware of.
Hmm.
But they don't ask for the keys for the Ferrari unless they're actually wanting to drive it, right?
Hmm.
They don't ask for the power unless they're looking to use it. They're looking to use it. They've been pushing for it for now 2 decades. They finally got it. Now they're going to ease into it so that they don't create a major public outcry, because that's really what they're in the balances of. Because they know that the power is in the people. The
Hmm.
MPs ultimately at the end of the day, break them down as individuals.
Hmm.
They want to feed their families. They want to live the lives that they want to live.
Hmm.
They want that big government paycheck every month. So if they don't think that they're going to get voted in, that's ultimately what's going to begin to motivate them, right?
Hmm.
And then in fact, we began a process back in the later 2000s, called the 308 TAC team at that time. And what it was had nothing to do with the 308 caliber rifle. It was 308 ridings in Canada at the time. Now it's 338. And so what we did is we broke it down and had people in each area to basically create this uprising, saying we're going to vote you out. We are
Hmm.
going to make sure that we vote you out if you don't
Hmm.
voice our concerns. You're here to represent us, and yet here you're representing Health Canada and the pharmaceutical industry. Completely
Hmm.
backwards. You're here to represent us. You're here to ensure that we get what we're looking for.
Hmm.
You work for us, right? And so it did. We were able to create pressure on every single riding throughout Canada, and that does have some power, because at the end of the day, yeah, they're told to toe the party line. They're
Hmm.
told, hey, you're
Yeah.
conservative, you go
Hmm.
with what the conservative
Yeah.
leader is telling you to do. You're liberal, you go with what the conservative
Yeah.
leader, NDP, whatever. But at the end of the day, they want that job. They want to be voted in.
Hmm.
And they are supposed to represent the people. They're supposed to,
Hmm.
theoretically. We see that it's much different than that, but yeah, it's always worth a try to take
Yeah.
that stand and to be vocal about it. And so currently, with what Sean Buckley is doing with the NHPPA.org, in sharing, some protocols, a plan of action on how to basically, write those letters to the MP.
Hmm.
Here's a form letter, but
Yeah.
customize it to yourself, vocalize your own concerns, and
Hmm.
then meet with your MP. That is a good first step.
Hmm.
And there's a chance that we can have this reversed, but we are in a disadvantaged state right now, because before we were always preventing it from coming to pass. We were
Hmm.
saying you're not going to put it through, but now it's been put through, right?
Hmm.
There's now a breach in the wall. We're now saying this needs to be reversed, push it back out, get this
Yeah.
back out, and fix the breach in the wall.
Hmm.
We need to be protected um, in our access to natural health products.
Yeah. Yeah, and bare minimum, it should have been come on its own, so it could have had its own like debate. So, like the fact that it was snuck in speaks a lot, and I think as people, we need to realize how much power we have, and the powers that be know this. This is why they've separated us so much. This is why they have made sure that if they've pitted us against each other, and just because of like my life and my beliefs and things that I straddle all of the different aspects. Like I'm playing, I don't know, I'm kind of in the middle in a lot of ways, and I'm watching different narratives pop up trying to create hate and animosity, and we all are the same. We all have so much more alike than we have separate, and what they don't want us is for us to realize this, and that to come together from different political ideas and come together from different viewpoints and talk and say, wow, actually, yeah, we disagree on this little thing, but all of this we agree on. We need to create change. And we can't have looked at the world in the last even 5 years without realizing how afraid the powers that be are of us coming together. And that's what we need to have conversations with people who don't agree with everything that you agree with. We need to understand points of view, and therefore we like when I get to talk to people, I get to talk to hundreds of people every year that are completely different than I would ever talk to. And they're beautiful, wonderful people. I wish everybody could have the work that I do, because a random person books in with me and I spend an hour and a half talking to them. And it's unbelievable. And we are so much more alike than I think we'd ever imagine. And if we come together, we can change things. We can create something. That's why they're pitting us against each other. That's my belief, at least.
Absolutely. Oh yeah, it's easy to conquer divided people. Absolutely. Yeah.
And we are so divided, more so than we've ever been.
Yeah. And it's easy to divide a people through a fearful situation as well, right?
Yeah.
And this is where the whole fear porn keeps on popping up. I mean, anybody who's watching the news, shut it off. Do yourself a service, shut that off, and you'll get a better perspective of what reality holds, and that life is more beautiful than you were told it was. But when you're watching the news, when you're watching all this type of stuff, and constantly having this new scare tactic over and over and over, whatever it may be, COVID 2.0, alien invasion, right? Terrorists, economic, all this type of stuff. It's just constant bombardment of fear, right? Now, there are some legitimate things taking place at risk, but that are put people at risk. Prepare for it. Simple. And if you're not divided, I mean, communities are really proficient at weathering the storms of whatever catastrophes take place.
Yeah.
People that are actually unified in a cause and work together. So, yeah, there's definitely an element of them attempting to divide us, and they've been pretty successful at it over the years. But we definitely need to take a stand and collaborate on this and make sure that we're unified in our message that we want access to natural health products. We're smart enough, we're educated enough, we have access to information that we as consumers can make an informed decision without Health Canada telling us that, no, you don't have access to that because it's not good for you, and we're just telling you it's not good for you, regardless of what information you have access to. We're saying it's not good for you, and we're also going to make it so you don't have access to this economically because, well, the cost has all gone up by 30, 40, 50% on these products. And I know, you didn't have quite enough money to afford it before, but you were scrunching what you could, but now you can't. It's just beyond your grasp. That's really where we're going. And when we take a look at the timing of this, they're talking about cost recovery that's going to significantly increase the cost of products at a time that inflation has already been incredibly high. And I can tell you from my perspective is we're not matching inflation with our price increases.
I don't know of anybody who is. No one is.
And I didn't think so either. So I can speak authoritatively from our position is that we've increased our prices once since 2015, right? We've increased our prices once, and our profit margins are lower now than they've ever been, in essence. Because of inflation. So even though we're still making the same amount of money off each bottle that we have been, since 2015, we did the one price increase in later 2021. Right? We'd held off a long time, and we finally did the price increase, and then we've kept it, and everybody else is still doing incremental price increases slowly, but it's not matching what the rate of inflation is.
And they're so thoughtful. They're like, we just can't survive unless we pull up by 5% or 2%. Like they're tiny. You're 100% right. I see that right across the board. They are price increases, but only out of desperation and is the smallest amount possible.
Exactly, because it's a fine line. Like our perspective, how we're looking at it is, we have people that are taking these products and getting life changes. We have people that are taking it as a general multi and okay, they become more resilient to stress and they just feel better. It's like the lights turned on even more. But we have people that are coming to us that are in absolute despair. And, they've had their lives ravaged by mental health conditions for decades or whatever, however long they've been around for, type of thing, and it's had an impact on their finances. It always does.
Always.
And our mission is to make sure that we are making the product available to them. And so if we were to raise our prices, we would lose sales. We'd make more profit off what we do sell, but we would lose sales. But the sales that we're losing are likely the ones that need it the most.
Yeah.
And that's the hard position that we're put in is, so what do? So we're trying to make ourselves more efficient, right? So that we don't have to increase our prices so much. So it's a real balancing act that all of the natural health companies are finding themselves in. And now you have Health Canada proposing these new cost recovery measures, which is just one of the small things. I want to make sure that we don't get myopic on this and lose sight of this. But it's one of the small attacks on the natural health industry is that, okay, it's going to knock out the small products that aren't selling a whole lot because the companies aren't going to say, hey, I'm going to pay, a licensing fee for that product. We're not even making that much profit off it every year. So why would I pay the licensing fee? Boom. There. Now you have those products gone. And then you have other companies that are US based and they're saying, that's too small of a market in Canada for us to cater to all this and to raise our prices. It's just not worth it. Boom. Whole company pulls out, right? And we've seen that already over the last, what are we at? We're at 19 years now since they put in the regulations. We've seen it incrementally as they're talking about enforcement and all that of their NPN regs. But now you have these companies starting to pull out that have no interest in a small market of Canada that's making it hard to, the hoops are getting more tighter for them to have to jump through. So we're going to lose more companies. But then these Canadian-based companies, you're going to see the paring back of the products. And then the products that they do keep, you're going to see the increased price.
Yeah.
Now, couple that with Bill C-47 and the enforcement powers that Health Canada has, and also how they're tightening down right now in relation to dictating what you can and can't say as a manufacturer about your products, which we just ended up with this issue over the past about 9 months. We were working with Health Canada. They came at us and said, hey, you have all this stuff on your website. You can't say that. Well, what do you mean we can't say that? We've been saying that all along. And we're only saying what the science is saying. We're actually just referencing back to the studies type of thing. So they keep on coming back at us. And so they eventually just came out with a list and said, you need to remove this from your website. And what it was a few interesting things. We have 35 medical journal publications on our website that were a result of the studies that have taken place on the Empower Plus alone, right? So these aren't just generalized studies that we're saying, hey, this applies because, no, these were studies that were done specifically on the Empower Plus. And we just had the studies listed. That's it. And with the abstracts, so you could read, about the study, or some of them you had full access to. You click on it and you could read the full study that was done. And these are independent studies coming out of universities that are generally being funded by different governments around the world. And yet now they're saying you can't have that up on your website. Why? Like, it's not like it's self-serving. It's actually we're providing information to people to make informed decisions about their own health.
Published research.
Right? And it's all validated. It's not like we're cherry picking studies and saying, well, this study was good and this one wasn't. So let's omit that. We're just throwing it all out there. And we don't need to cherry pick because there's nothing to cherry pick. It's all the same. The studies are all showing the same results, right? With very, very small variation, which is exactly what you'd anticipate to see anyways. And so now they're saying you can't have that. Okay. And then they go through the testimonials, and we have all of these testimonials that people have been given. They want to share their story.
They're people. They're people saying things.
And now they're saying you can't have these testimonials up there. So now when you go to the truehopecanada.com website, you're going to see that there's less information available, but I've also, we've done a video or videos talking about that you no longer have access to this information. So if you go to our science and research page now, all you get is a video of me talking about censorship and that it's nothing new, and that Health Canada has been doing this for many years. going back to trying to, they shut down the double-blind placebo-controlled trial. They tried to shut down all research in Canada. Fortunately, they had no power over other jurisdictions, so the research continued on, in the U.S., in Hawaii, in Australia, in New Zealand, out of Christchurch, New Zealand, that type of thing, right? And so the studies kept on coming, and it wasn't until we won the court case against Health Canada in 2005 that the studies began to happen again in Canada. So it's nothing new, but basically all you're going to see is all of these studies that were once there now has a censored stamp across each one of them. So Health Canada is already tightening the bolts down, and now they've just been granted it as of June of this year, this incredible enforcement power that they could come in, and they could have come in if they had the enforcement power, let's say 2 years ago or a year ago. They could have actually just come in and said, hey, you're out of line. You shouldn't have these studies up on your website because we said so. And boom, here's a $5 million fine.
And then you're gone.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
And then we're gone.
$5 million is a major percentage of any income coming in of any supplement company. It's well above the profit of what the president of any company is going to walk home with. And no supplement I don't know all of the numbers of every supplement on the market, but I would be shocked if there is any single supplement that makes more than $5 million each year in profit.
Well, let me put it this way. Across Western Canada, in quite a few stores, the Empower Plus is a number one seller. And if it's not the number one seller, then it's on its way to getting there. So we are quite well established in the West, and in Eastern Canada, we're getting more well established, right? And so, but even in light of that, so I'm putting that in context that there are quite a few stores across Western Canada that the Empower Plus is their top selling product.
Yeah.
And I can tell you this, we don't make anywhere close to $10 to $30 million a year gross profit, right? And we only, but part of that's because we only have 6 products. We're not flooding the market with all these Me Too products. We only hold on to the top products that are going to be life-changing. So every one of our products is very powerful and pinpointed, right? So we're not, we don't have 100 SKUs or 50 SKUs that we're making profit off of, which does make a difference. But I can tell you, we are nowhere close to $10 to $30 million a year gross profit for the whole of Truehope Canada. So a $5 million fine, it's impossible is what it would be. And because we couldn't possibly increase the cost of our products, even though people claim that they need them for their life, we couldn't increase the cost of our products enough to be able to pay off a $5 million fine.
Even $50,000 cost recovery to bring a product onto market, it could take a couple years for that SKU to make back that cost. Well, this is where all the profit comes too, is when a SKU is first released, and that's where all the marketing dollars go. And a lot of supplement companies are spending half of their profit on marketing just to keep people just to make sure people know about it. And we are going to lose all innovation if some lists I've seen as innovative products, it could be $250,000 in cost recovery. There's no company that could cover that I can think of.
Yep. Yeah, they don't have a simplistic licensing fee anymore. So example, when we had the licensing done for Empower Plus years ago, the very first thing they said was, well, you can't have boron. Okay. So we fought with them. We provided all the evidence, all the studies, and they said, no.
There's a lot of products with boron in it.
Well, not at first, not in 2004, right?
Okay.
And that was what was shocking, because when eventually what they did is they gave us 2 licenses. They gave us a general license on the first one that we ever had, which looked like this. It was the very first release of the EMP that we ever had. And when you look at the label, there's no boron, and that was the one that could be made readily available to everybody. The second one is the one right behind me here, and it had boron, but it was adult only. We're talking restriction of cigarettes, because it had boron. You could only, so it had these restrictions around it with these strong warnings that made it non-marketable. You couldn't market it. So we actually parked it for a few years. We brought to the market the one without boron. We carried that one for about 4 years, and it was good, but boron is a crucial, element, and even
It
though
is.
it's only 1 out of the 36 that had to be removed, it still wasn't quite as therapeutic, and
Mhm.
so we finally went back and fought with Health Canada about it, and we got them to lift the restrictions because at this point in time, they're now licensing all sorts of products of boron
Yeah. Mhm.
with none of these restrictions, but yet
None.
they
Yeah.
held to those restrictions with us, right? Because something opened their eyes at some point in time that they said, okay, boron is no longer prohibited in essence. We're going to allow it. And like you said, there's lots of products of boron. There's
Mhm.
products that just are simply
Or just
boron.
boron, yeah.
Yeah. Whereas in 2004, the science must have been different. So boron wasn't allowed in Canada. You as a consumer couldn't go to the store and buy a product with boron with a license. It was not Health Canada license. Unfortunately, they were not enforcing those regulations and saying the only products that can be for sale are ones with an NPN license. It wouldn't be till around 2010 that they started
Mhm.
tightening things down a little more, and they did it gradually and gradually so that people wouldn't, there wouldn't be an outcry.
Mhm.
But yeah,
Well, that
so
they also didn't staff enough in 2004, and so there was a 2 to 3 year backlog for the NPN numbers. Like it was years and years and years before you could submit, and within 6 months get an NPN number.
yeah,
Mhm.
exactly. And so now if we were to try to get our product licensed, being 36 ingredients, it's a novel product, we would be at basically the top of their fee structure for licensing. And so now it would be like $60,000 versus, a few $1,000s like it was in the
Mhm.
past, right?
Yeah.
So now we see like this huge increase, right? 1,000% increase or more on licensing fees for innovative products, like you're saying
Mhm.
there, which makes it a deterrent. Somebody,
Mhm.
if you have a small company, but you've got somebody who is witty and has made some interesting discoveries, but they're small,
Mhm.
right? And they're
Yeah.
wanting to bring it out to the market. They want to bring something out to the market that's going to be tremendous to whoever
Mhm.
takes it. And it has a chance of getting a foothold in the marketplace. Well, the first hurdle that they have is how do I come up with the money?
Yeah.
Now they're having to basically sell it to investors, right?
Yeah.
In order to
Mhm.
drum up enough money just to get through the regulatory hoops
Mhm.
to even put it into the marketplace, let alone come up with a marketing campaign, which is not cheap to actually get a
Yeah.
foothold in the market. So the very first hurdle is the government.
Mhm.
And that's how they form monopolies.
Yeah.
Is it's not that they're sanctioning saying you're the only company that can do this. It's just that they provide the environment that that company is the only company that gets to do that, or that those are the
Yeah.
only set of companies that are able to jump through these hoops because it's too onerous, it's too
Yeah.
much for all the other companies, and that's how they weed out the small guys and eventually come up with
Mhm.
monopolized industry,
Yeah.
and that's exactly what they're doing.
And the health industry is full of incredibly innovative little companies. And what really frustrated me when this all came out is the news articles that were had quotes from people like Barry Power, of the head of the Pharmacists Association, that would say things like, um, natural health products are not regulated and can be toxic, but they're highly regulated. The 2004 guidelines, which we've talked about a bunch of times, the NHP guidelines, are seen as the most strict in the world, and Europe has been looking at them as a way to see how is it working. And I have a bit of a unique perspective as a practitioner. I do like the 2004 guidelines because it gives me something to say, yeah, these are regulated, that what's in the bottle is on the label and what's on the label is in the bottle, and the any health claims have to be substantiated. And so my American clients often will buy supplements from Canadian companies for that reason. And it's just that now this new step isn't making supplements safer, it's making them more expensive. That's this hoop. And that it's not a safety problem. We're not arguing that supplements need to be like that like we don't want safety regulations. It's more of we need to keep these accessible, and they have a very high safety protocol, a safety profile. They Supplement companies have had for years had to keep track of any counterindications, any reactions to them. And but somehow that wasn't enough, and now they have to have these higher regulations, and that's what we're really saying more than anything, is that it's these new hoops that are going to make it hard for you to have it, not make them safer.
Exactly. And once again, playing off the fear there, right? And they've done a fantastic job on that, on playing off people's fears and turning at some point in time, these supplements into the boogeyman that they have to have their stamp of approval for somebody just to trust that, oh, good, I can sleep at night, knowing that I bought this product. I can feel okay with popping the top and taking a few capsules out of there because the government said that it's safe, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the unfortunate nature, but it's like you're saying, it affects buying behavior even,
Mm-hmm.
because people have this huge concern. Well, we live in a day and age right now with simply those Google reviews, right?
Mm-hmm.
Hey, if I'm marketing my products, the marketplace is going to regulate for me. If I'm putting out junky products that are causing issues, somebody's going to have something to say about it. They're going to put it out there. And as soon as you start to see 2, 3, 4, 5, you see a pattern emerging. Now I've lost my foothold in the marketplace, regardless of how great my marketing message was, because I've got people that are actually sharing real life accounts of the damage that my products may have done.
I
Right?
think people also underestimate the wonders of health food store staff. Being a staff member of a supplement section requires a huge amount of knowledge. Like, it's 2 or 3 years of training to be able to, like, people just walk in and say, I have these symptoms, what should I have? And that person who's working a retail job has to understand what those symptoms are and help them find the right thing. I learned about your product because of staff members are like, you have to hear about that. You need to know about this one. My son is on it. I'm on it. It's life-changing. And that's why your products do so well, is that you have staff members talking about it. It's the same thing as a Google review. If you have a terrible product, staff don't sell it. And because they usually have tried everything, and or they get the feedback over and over again and want to be trusted, and so they also will weed out the products that aren't doing very well. They're not going to put it on their shelf, even because its shelf space is worth a lot, and we have these hoops already. We don't need more.
Right. And so the point that I'm getting at, I mean, in 2004 is a little bit different. Not that I'm advocating that there was any necessity of the regulations.
Mm-hmm.
I'm more of a libertarian,
Mm-hmm.
not more, I am a libertarian at heart. And done a significant amount of study back in my younger years in relation to that, coming to those conclusions as to whenever government involves itself in something, it generally only gets worse. And when I say generally, that's almost always. But when we're taking a look at the regulations today, we could actually scrap those regulations, and you do better for yourself consulting with health food store staff that are talking to people and getting the feedback on a day-to-day basis.
Mm-hmm.
Looking online at Google reviews. Really, we've got a way better regulatory body in place naturally as the market regulates itself with all this information. The access to information is what's so empowering that Health Canada has actually they've lost any viability, even though we know they're intense and we know the damage they've done, and we know that they've literally compromised and killed people, compromised lives and killed people here in Canada. They've done those things and knowingly, and they have never done anything to remedy it or to try to prevent that from taking place again. They have no viability in relation to regulating health claims or anything, because we have access to all of this profound information. The market is now at such a point that it regulates itself very, very efficiently, and that nobody's going to go, and not nobody, but most people are going to educate themselves, and they're going to find out if a product is good or not. They're going to look at the reviews. They have a responsibility to do their due diligence, and if they don't, and it ends up to their detriment, that's because they had the choice and they didn't. But the fact of the matter is that we're not going to see products ending up in health food stores that are dangerous. The health food store would never want to tarnish their reputation by having that type of thing. The market regulates itself.
Yeah.
And that's the only way that we've really done well with getting out there, is exactly like you said. We don't have large marketing campaigns. We've never had the profitability to do so. We spent all our money fighting Health Canada for a decade, right?
Yeah.
Um, there was no marketing department in our company during that time. There was basically a legal regulatory department on how do we fight off this battle. And
Yeah.
so, that's where we're coming from. And
Mhm.
so it's only been through the regulation of the market, through the dissemination of information, word of mouth, that our products have actually
Yeah.
gotten a foothold out there, really.
Yeah.
Over the last 5-6 years, we've started doing more social media activity, yes, to share that word of mouth, to share people's experiences. And now Health Canada's coming in and say you can't say those things, you can't share that information.
And this is the thing that gets me, is that like there was a lot of news stories around when they snuck this bill C-47 in with the budget. But if it was legitimate, if there was a safety concern, they'd be able to say, we need this because this product killed people, this product is unsafe, we need to be able to come in. They had nothing to back up their claims that this is required. And we've had almost 20 years, 19 years of the NHP guidelines. So they've had their fingers inside this for a long time. And in no article did I see an actual product that caused harm that they were able, like you'd think they would have pulled it out if there was even one. The only anecdote that I saw was a doctor, an emergency room doctor in Toronto, says that a naturopath took a patient off an anti-seizure drug and gave zinc instead, and that was harmful. Well, naturopaths in Ontario are regulated as much as a medical doctor. So if that happened, that's at first a practitioner problem, and that practitioner would have lost their license for sure. And that's not a zinc is a problem. It was the advice given, and that's all they could do. And so that's what really frustrates me, is that if this was required, show me. There's tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of products on the market. Show me that there is one that is so dangerous or has been dangerous that Health Canada felt their hands were tied, couldn't do enough to save the health of the people, and that require this type of regulation. And they didn't. They didn't sell that. And therefore there can't be even one, because they would have found it. Don't you think? They would have found it.
Yeah, absolutely. And they would have been sure to disseminate that information. I mean, they're still in the practice of disseminating bad information. So here they've got our Empower Plus licensed, and yet if you go on their website, you can still find, I believe they have 8 published warnings about our product going back from the 2000s, saying how it's not safe. And yet one of the studies that was done on it was done solely on the safety of it from people that have been taking large amounts of it for some time, considerable amount of time, blood work done, all that type of stuff. Came out flying colors. Their health was great, right? It was a perfect example of a safety study showing that, hey, by taking even copious amounts of this supplement and doing so for years, you're going to come out with really great blood work and everything's great.
Well above the recommended dose, above.
And Health Canada's coming out and saying contrary, and they refuse. I don't know if they've changed their website enough and finally dropped that off, but my understanding, the last time I was aware, they still have those bad warnings up there, and yet here they're licensing our product for sale in Canada, but yet they have these warnings about it. It's like you have two different, the left hand not knowing what the right hand is doing type of thing. But anyways, it's interesting, because if there was death that had been caused by natural health products, if there was harm, they would be sure to put it out there. But yet, like you said, they'll use examples like that case there in Ontario. Not a zinc issue. That's nothing to do with zinc, right? That is an advice issue. If it's actually being touted, if it's actually the way that it's being touted, right?
Yeah.
I'm not even in a position to be able to judge that situation if it's even real, right?
I didn't substantiate it with the name of the practitioner. There wasn't in the news any the governing board of that naturopathic doctor, that there's no conversation about that, which would have happened if it was an actual naturopathic doctor.
So we have an issue here. It's really an information war where bad information is going out there, twisted information to create a boogeyman to try to justify where Health Canada is going in all of this. But at the end of the day, It's not going to be good for the consumer. It's, many times we see this disconnect. We say, yes, tax the corporations more. Corporations don't pay tax. The consumers pay tax. And so if you have a corporation that's in the business of manufacturing, that tax is merely tacked on to the cost of the product. So if you're consuming those products, you're paying the tax. The corporation isn't. They can't afford to do so. They're not going to, reduce their profit margins to pay a tax. So it's really the consumers that are paying all of the taxes. And so when you have, this cost recovery coming into play, it's, at face value, oh yeah, good. That way, maybe we won't have to pay as much direct taxes to the government now because it's costing the government. Well, if you're consuming natural health products, you're paying that now. You are paying more to the government. Maybe perhaps the conversation should be, how do we get rid of the inefficiencies of government and get rid of regulations that aren't necessary so that we don't have to pay more taxes, right? It's just burdensome on us and to no value. There's no value to it that can be identified at this point in time, other than, oh, hey, it's got an NPN number on there. Oh, good. I was scared because I don't know, there could be some shady stuff out there. Well, if there's shady stuff out there, there's going to be litigation. There's going to be criminal action, and there's going to be some Google reviews that are going to illustrate that there's a problem there. So I don't think we need to be so concerned about it having a government stamp of approval that for us to be able to take it. Is there anything else that you're seeing that is of concern? I know you're talking about, you recommend supplements. You're not selling them. Thank you for clarifying that, because right up to that, when we're talking about this, people can naturally just come to the conclusion that, hey, they're biased. They're trying to protect their financial interests and all that. You're not making money other than a couple bucks a month thing off them.
No, obviously, I buy them. I'm a consumer of them.
I don't consume more than I make off them. I can tell you that much. But I am a large consumer of natural health products, and not just our products. There's other really great companies out there that I'd be concerned if I didn't have access to, that my family relies on, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm a large consumer of natural health products. So I'm in the same boat, that I have a bias that way as well, where I can actually objectively look at the situation from a consumer perspective, but also look at it from the perspective of a manufacturer, where we're supplying these products and we have a mission to try to help people. And in essence, they're compromising our ability to fulfill that mission by making them economically unavailable, and also making it so that we don't have the ability to be able to manufacture at a to bring up more innovative products. And we do have a number on the table that we want to bring out, and we're actually looking at it, and we're just saying, in all of this, instability, like you don't invest a whole lot into a marketplace that is unstable. And that's part of the problem, is what they're doing right now, even before it's in place, is they're already deterring companies from bringing out innovative products, because nobody wants to put that investment out into a market that, I don't know how long it'll be able to be around. Am I going to get my return on investment? I don't know, right? Is it going to bankrupt the rest of the company? Is it going to prevent us from being able to continue on with the other products that we have been utilizing for some time, that disseminating? That's the concern. And so, especially during economic times as such, where people's money is stretched thin right now, we're already having to tread lightly. We already have to be very wise and careful in our decisions to make sure that we can continue to get our products out and not have to raise our prices if we don't have to. Right?
Supplements saved my health. What I didn't mention is, in 2002, when I first came into this industry, my health was in a horrible state. I had, my undergrad is performance music, incredibly stressful. I had an underlying health issue that I didn't know and was undiagnosable. I'd been to doctor after doctor after doctor after doctor. It was a major gut bacteria overgrowth. And I was gray. My complexion was gray. I was so foggy, I'd forget what day of the week it was, where I was going. I had nerve damage on both my arms, tendonitis in both my thumbs, uncontrolled asthma. I was a flute player. really bad combination. And I came into this industry. I can't believe they hired me because I was in such bad health, but I'm good at interviews and I'm good at customer service. So they thankfully brought me in, and trying their innovative product that would be very hard to bring on the market with these regulations was the first thing that I took. And in 2 weeks, my brain turned back on and I could think again. And my job was customer service. I got to learn about health, and that's how I became a holistic nutritionist. But what it did was it gave me a shorter jump between how horrible I felt to feeling like a human being that could function. Then I could have the energy to change my diet. My diet was all processed sugar and refined flour. Like, a vegetable was once a month maybe. And to this place of like, oh, I feel a bit better, maybe I can start putting effort into how I eat. And I've worked with thousands of people at this point, and often they need a similar little jump. They need something to help them right now, so they have the energy. When their energy is a 1 or a 2 out of 10, which is where mine was, to get them even to a 4 is life changing. And then we can create the other changes. And I'm worried that there's going to be a whole pile of people who at 25 was just like me, feeling full of inflammation and just like their body is not able to function. My brain couldn't work. I was dealing with major depression at the same time. And like I can't even begin to tell you how bad the fog was. I literally would sit on the subway in Toronto and wondering where I was, what day of the week it was, and was I going to the place that I was supposed to go, and have to be like constantly thinking through it. That's how bad my brain was working. To 2 weeks on this supplement, I remembered I like to learn because I could think again. And there's so many innovative products right now that can help people with that little jump. Yeah, they're not a solution to a terrible lifestyle, but they can get you to a place where you can say, okay, what else can I do? And I'm a holistic nutritionist from that day when I saw how big of a change how big of a difference one little change can make. And that's what we're losing.
Yeah.
We're losing that ability to make a quick little jump. And in this life that's significantly more stressful than it was 20 years ago when I did this jump, and our diet is significantly less nutritious than it was 20 years ago, I'm worried. I'm afraid.
No. Yeah, and we have reason to be. We truly have reason to have concern, for our fellow beings, and praise God that we've had these personal experiences like this. I came out, depressed. I remember being 13 years old, type of thing. Considering how am I going to slip my wrist, that type of thing, right?
Yeah, me
Um,
too.
and thank God that we've had these life-changing experiences, and as you say, like a jump or a kickstart, right? It's a catalyst. It gets
Yep.
us to a place where we're capable of saying, hey, this is who I want to be, and I've got the motivation now and the drive and the ability. I'm going to change a bunch of stuff in my life. And in fact, I found myself in a similar situation in my early 20s, where it does, good supplementation doesn't replace a good diet as well. They have to work in synergy. And I took advantage of, took it for granted, the fact that I had all these supplements available to me, and I had like a lousy diet. And I had to change everything in my early 20s because my health was starting to go down. Even though I was taking supplementation, I was living such a crappy lifestyle, like terrible. But I was in a place though that that had enough self-awareness, because of all the supplements I was taking, that I could say, hey, this isn't working for me. Not at
Yeah.
all. I need to change it. And then was able to make all the other lifestyle changes necessary that,
Yeah.
I was more youthful in my,
Mhm.
late 20s and early 30s than I
Yeah.
was in my
Me too.
teenage years, right?
Me too. 100%. Me too.
And
Mhm.
you bring up a phenomenal point. That was 20 years ago,
Mhm.
right? That was 20 years ago, and things have changed so rapidly, where people are in such a disadvantaged state today,
Mhm.
where they don't have, even though there's been a lot of different health fads and stuff like that, most people are actually more depleted today than they were 20 years ago.
Mhm.
The problem has only continually got worse in agriculture and all that. The food has only gotten more toxic sprays, all that type of stuff. We're being bombarded with environmental toxins all over the place. They're more disadvantaged. They're in more of a need than you and I were back
Yeah.
then.
Mhm.
And so at this given time in history, there's never been a time that these products are most needed than now, are
Mhm.
most important in being able to help transform lives and turn people around.
Yeah.
And yet Health Canada is putting that at threat.
Yeah.
After 3 years of complete turmoil and strife for the average person out there, that now we have a major mental health crisis. We thought we had a mental health crisis before, but we have a major mental health crisis today. And yet here they're trying to weed out the supplement companies that would be able to help with those mental health crises, or limit the information, like in our case, where they're saying you can't have those studies up there. You can't have testimonials up there for people to, in essence, listen to someone else's story that they can relate to and say, hey, that was me. That was me. And I could be just like them. They've gotten their life back. Health Canada say, no, you can't have that information up there. And so, we have to act. Coming to a close here, we have to engage in some kind of action to protect our rights. These are fundamental human rights, to have access to these different life-changing supplements that are really just food. Really, it's what nature's providing. This comes from the earth. Who is the government to be able to regulate that and say, you can't have this from the earth, you can't have this from the earth, right? I can see when we get into a laboratory setting, we start to really change stuff, and we begin taking stuff that the earth is providing and turning it into dangerous substances. Yes, there should be probably some regulation around that, because, well, it's foreign to our bodies. It can be extremely dangerous. You can kill a lot of people, and the pharmaceutical industry has demonstrated that time after time after time. What do you think that we should do from your perspective? What do you think the best plan of action is moving forward here? If you were to give words of encouragement and to the viewers, to say, hey, look, if you want to protect your access to these supplements, this is what I'd recommend you do. What would that be?
I think that if you have the energy, so you spoke really well to how exhausted people are and where people are, like, for those of you who are kind of where we are, David, where we have had that change, we've felt that change, and we have the energy and bandwidth to do something, and we need to then do something. We can't just sit back. And I think it involves writing to your MP, being a voice and saying, like, my vote for you matters on what you do with this. Like, let them know this. I've written to my MP, I think 5 times at this point. We need to talk to each other and just like have a gentle, nice conversation of like, hey, have you heard about this? This is what I'm hearing in the articles. But then, like, when I talk to people who are in the industry, they're telling me, like, these are really safe products. They're already heavily regulated, and these new changes are going to make it so we won't have access to them anymore. That I didn't realize. And just like have this conversation with people that may not have read the same things as you have, but this is the problem. We're having trouble talking to each other. So we have to do it in a conversation, not a, you need to hear this. And we need to act. And those of you whose energy is at a 1 or a 2, I feel for you. I've been there. We are all here to help you feel better. Those of you who've moved out of that, let's stand up. Let's do something. We have the energy. We have the bandwidth. We have to, because what's going to happen next if we don't?
Exactly. Well said. Very well said. For those, like you say, that your energy and motivation levels way down, strongly recommend that you go to the health food store, find some supplements that are going to assist you. They're going to be that kickstart. If you're dealing with mental health crisis, or you're feeling lower, than normal, well, we have some products here. Go to truehopecanada.com. Look at the information that's still available for you to see that Health Canada hasn't said you can't look at, and make some informed decisions as to what would be most impactful. And the Empire Plus has been phenomenal. It's been a lifesaver for me and my family, and really broken the chain of suicides that, it wasn't just my mother. My grandfather committed suicide. It was a family hereditary thing, and it wasn't looking very good for me and my 8 siblings that my mom and dad all had, right? That we all were struggling with the same mental health conditions. So, these supplements can literally be life-saving. In the meantime, this is coming from Sean Buckley. What his plan B is, in essence, that he's communicating is stock up on the supplements that you are currently using and relying on from day-to-day basis, and just make sure that you have a little store of them available in case that product or those products are no longer available, because we don't know within the marketplace with the enforcement powers and whatnot. We don't know the viability of these various companies out there. I can speak to the effect of our company. We're going to continue to fight this fight to the very, the very last step, and hopefully we're able to turn things around. Hopefully we are. I don't know if we're going to be able to, but we're going to do what we can to make this happen. That's one of the reasons why we're having these conversations with people like yourself, Lisa, and with Sean Buckley and with other individuals within the natural health industry to bring awareness to what's going on within the marketplace today. But we're going to continue to fight the fight, and our products are going to continue to be made available as long as they can be available for. That's part of our mission. And so we're going to continue to do that. But in the meantime, for those of you that are watching, stock up on the supplements that you're currently using, and maybe take the time to look into products that would be even more beneficial for your health at this point in the game, because the more stressful it gets, the more need we're in of having nutrited bodies that can serve us rather than imprison us. So thank you so much for coming on, Lisa. It was a pleasure seeing you again. I mean, it's been a number of years. So good to see you again and to reconnect. And thank you for your wisdom and the knowledge that you provide here. It was a fantastic conversation. I appreciate you coming on.
It was so great to chat with you again. I've always enjoyed our chat. So it was really nice to catch up.
Awesome. Well, blessings to you. And until next time, God bless everybody who's watching this, and may you all take some action to ensure that your rights to natural health products are maintained.